call this meeting to order and begin with a roll call. Julie Capizzello, Bob Carroll, I see Bob's name on here. Bob Carroll, are you present? We'll circle back. Doreen DeFazio, Victoria Duckworth, Susan Duval, Lindsay Fox. She told us in advance she wouldn't be here. Anne Marie Foley.
Present.
Deborah George.
Here.
Linda Hassinger.
Here.
Brian Houle.
Here.
Chantel Kimball.
Here.
Essex Petrie.
Here.
David Robbins is present. Sue Robbins.
Here.
Colleen Roy, she told us she wouldn't be able to make it. Roshan Otangi is absent. And Bob Carroll put on chat that he's having network issues. I will take that as confirmation that he is present. So, that said, we do have a quorum. Let's proceed into our agenda. Our first action item is to approve the minutes of the May and June meetings. If everybody's, Fiona, your hand is raised.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we just, Susan actually just signed on, Susan Duval as well. So just wanted to make sure.
Oh, excellent.
Roll call.
So I will mark Susan as being present. Now back to our action is minutes of May 6th and June 3rd. Any, if everybody's had a chance to review those, is there a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the minutes from May 6th, 2024 and June 3rd, 2024 as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Call for a vote. Bob Carroll. All right, Bob may still be having network issues. Susan Duval. Anne Marie?
Aye.
Did I hear
This
Bob?
is Susan. This is Susan. I said aye.
Yeah, Carol's aye.
Excellent. Anne Marie?
Aye.
Deborah George?
Aye.
Linda Hassinger? Linda?
Unmute. I got it. Yes. I'm having network problems too.
The network is really, generous to us tonight. Mr. Houle?
Oh, I did that. Oh, okay. I'm fine.
Mr. Houle? He was on mute and I saw his lips moving. I'll take that as an aye.
Aye.
All right, Ms. Kimball,
Aye.
Mr. Petrie,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Ms. Robbins?
Aye.
Declare the motion carried unanimously. Our next two action items, Justin Hollander had indicated that he is not able to continue as a voting member of the committee. He wishes to be considered an associate member. So any discussion, I don't know. I suppose we could take a formal vote on it.
I move we make Justin Hollander associate member.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Carroll.
Carol's aye.
Ms. Duval.
Duval's aye.
Ms. Foley.
Aye.
Ms. George.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Houle.
Aye.
Ms. Kimball.
Aye.
Mr. Petrie.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Ms. Robbins?
Aye.
Declare the motion carried unanimously. Action item 3, I think that does not require a formal vote from the committee. Mr. Allen, John Allen, has submitted his resignation a couple of weeks ago, and late this afternoon, Julie Grace sent an email to Fiona and myself, resigning also as a voting member of the committee. I think the receipt of those emails is sufficient to have them remove the committee. We will inform the select board, who is our appointing authority, and take it from there. So Fiona?
Mr. Chair, so just confirming, we don't need a vote for that? I think we've done that.
That is right. It's my understanding that by submitting a letter of resignation to us, it becomes effective on receipt of the resignation letter. And then we are obligated to inform our appointing authority, and they will decide whether and when and how to advertise for replacements for the vacancies if they so choose. At least that's my understanding of things. Sue?
Usually when someone resigns on committees that I've been, we usually accept their resignation with regret. So I would like to accept their resignations with regret.
I will take that as a motion.
I second that.
Moved and seconded, and typically the appointing authority does likewise, but yeah. So moved and seconded that we accept the resignations with regret. In discussion of the motion.
Yes, I just want to point out that I did not, because Julie notified us after the agenda was posted, her name is not listed. But again, because the chair's explanation doesn't matter,
Yep.
I believe so. We just want to be very clear.
Yes, and if anybody has an objection to just go ahead and voting accepting, we could also defer that to our next meeting. But there is a motion on the floor.
Yeah, I think we can move ahead and vote on the motion.
Yep, I'd like to keep things as simple as possible here. So with no further discussion, Mr. Carroll,
Carol's eye.
Ms. Duval,
Duval's aye.
Ms. Foley,
Foley, aye.
Ms. George,
George, aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Hool,
Aye.
Mr. Kimball,
Ms. Kimball, but aye.
Mr. Petrie,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Ms. Robbins
Aye.
declares the motion carried unanimously. That completes our action item agenda. We now will move into discussion items. We've got chapter reviews of the quality of life and transportation chapters. And after that, we can discuss next steps. So I guess we'll let whichever of you, Sarah, Elena, or whoever wants to kick off the discussion on quality of life.
I want to make sure Fiona's raised hand. I want to make sure she gets a chance to ask the question.
Yes.
Sorry, all the raised hands that I have. Just for the so the working group is aware the discussion today. We're following up on the last meeting with the quality of life. We did receive a lot of feedback in the matrix, and a lot of the feedback was really great, and the CMRPC were able to work on implementing that. Still chipping away at the services and facilities, so that's why you're not seeing it this week. So that'll be in a future meeting. So just so we're clear, and then introduction to the transportation chapter, just because I just didn't want folks to wonder why we're not still talking about services and facilities, but that's forthcoming.
Yeah, thank
We
you.
haven't forgotten. It hasn't been forgotten, but what you're prepared to discuss tonight primarily is quality of life and then transportation.
Right.
And thank you everyone for your comments. They're very informative and very helpful. So we wanted to take a little bit more time to implement your comments into the town services chapter, because it is more complex and there are many departments to take into account. We're trying to be as comprehensive as possible. We know this matters for funding in the future, so we want to make sure we capture as many of the needs of the departments as possible. So with that in mind, we wanted to take a little bit more time to work on it. But today, as Fiona mentioned, we'll be talking about quality of life. We'll try to go fairly quickly through it so that we leave a little bit more time for transportation and hopefully finish going through transportation. My colleague Eric will be presenting that chapter, but we'll start with quality of life, and Sarah will walk us through the comments.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Yeah, as Elena said, these were super helpful comments, and we've been talking throughout the month on how wonderful it is to have a committee that's reading these chapters thoroughly and looking for those little details that aren't exactly Grafton specific, or don't align with the facts that you all know so intimately. So it does feel like we're a little bit of a team. But I'll go through the big questions here, and I have some flagged in yellow that I wanted to just quickly shoot to the committee before we made changes on them. So with the Dropbox link that Fiona sent you, you can see the most updated version of this and the most updated version of all the chapters as we keep honing in on these small changes. Quality of life is still tweaking a little bit. So the most up-to-date version is on the Dropbox. So I'll go through some of these that turned into bigger language changes. Oh, one thing I highlighted was the environmental justice map. We will update it, but I don't want to do it just yet since they've been tweaking it online and tweaking the methodology a little bit. So I think we could wait a few months until that's more solidified, but it'll be good to have the most up-to-date version. Same with the titles for the maps. We'll do last minute formatting for the maps once all the chapters are complete. We added a little bit more to the food section in general, I think is the biggest section that changed, and most of it is growing. So we added more information from the Grafton Food Bank specifically. We added more information on some of the statistics that we had added. I think there was a comment in here on clarifying how many people in Grafton we think are on government services. So we had the poverty statistic, but we added the amount of people in Grafton that are on SNAP/EBT, and we added some more from the food bank on that to clarify how many people we're talking about. I think a few of the action items were tweaked to include words like continue to, rather than just starting with the action item, to reflect more of what the town is currently doing. Same with the action item on hosting like open houses, is more to the podcast that's been going on and the Ask Me Anythings. Again, wanting to keep those action items in there as we go through 20 years, but also acknowledging what the town's already been doing and kind of moving in that specific direction is really helpful. We also tweaked the food desert section, I think is a little bit further down here, to include more context on what we're talking about. And we did change it from a food desert to a place lacking food access, because there are a few formalized definitions of food desert that aren't as relevant for the town of Grafton, as Dave mentioned, are a little more of an urban context. But we did keep in the walking distance to acknowledge everybody in Grafton that doesn't have a car, this 5%, and people under, I mean, technically 16, but probably closer to 18 years of age, and elderly residents without access to a car. We added a little bit more context to that section. I also wanted to come back to this question about the description of the scope of the chapter to make sure we know exactly what the committee is looking for here. Was this looking at more of like a bullet points of everything we have, or just like a deeper introduction that sets you up more for the chapter before you read it? I can zoom in.
Yeah, so my thought on that, and that really applies to every one of the chapters, is that sort of an introductory paragraph that just says, this is what this chapter is going to talk about. These basic sort of, these are the topics that we're covering. In the case of quality of life, the concept of quality of life, as I tried to say in my comment here, the concept of quality of life is pretty broad, and pretty much everything in the master plan can be reasonably related to quality of life. But I think the purpose of this particular chapter is to focus on quality of life topics that are not covered elsewhere. And yeah, I don't quite know the best way to say that here, but the idea is to sort of give the reader a an understanding of this is what this chapter is going to be talking about. Without going into any details of describing what the findings are or what the goals and objectives are going to be. It's just this is what you can expect to read about in this chapter.
And David, thank you. Thanks for this comment. I think this would be good writing practice for the rest of the chapters as well. When we
Yes.
edit this as a package, I think this is something we should introduce. It's good journalistic practice to outline what the reader will be reading throughout the article or chapter. So we'll try to include that in all the chapters.
Yep. Sort of following the writing advice I got so many years ago, I don't even remember. It's something like, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So the introduction, the meat of it, and then a conclusion. So that, that model doesn't fit perfectly here, but I do think it's important for every one of these chapters to begin with, like a fairly brief paragraph explaining, this is what you're going to be reading about here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll do that for all the chapters. Another one I wanted to bring up to the committee was this idea to maybe cut the action item on each town department creating how-tos for procedures that are typically taken with the public, for the note that it might be challenging to keep them up to date, and maybe that could be a hindrance. So I wanted to quickly bring this to the committee to see if there are any thoughts about whether or not to keep this action item, if it works for Grafton.
Which one? Can you just review that again? Sorry, which action item?
This is an action item. It's, I think, let me go back to I'll read the actual text of it. But it is each town department creating how-tos. So to it. Create one sheet how-tos for all town departments for popular town processes to serve as a reference for residents.
And it's town departments, sorry, you said?
Yep.
Fiona, do you get a sense of how departments might feel about coming up with something like that?
Yeah, thanks. I like this idea. I do think that I do see instances, planning department is guilty too, of having, guidelines or things in place, and you kind of, they work pretty well, and sometimes they kind of fall off the radar in terms of staying updated. So most of the stuff, because, this is planning specific, but like rooted in like Mass General Law, a lot of things won't change too much. But, when we do our, we updated our permitting guide, that didn't change too much, but it was kind of one of those things where it's like, if you don't have your eye on the ball, you can miss it. There are some departments that I think would need a lot more how-to information than others, I think. But not saying anything, either way. I think, it's the working group's choice. But I see the merits, and I also see how it could be a little bit difficult. It's almost like we need similar to our civic engagement discussion of here's how I engage with the town manual, and try and shorthand it so that it's digestible and actually understandable for somebody kind of coming in off the street and saying, I want to do some basic function.
Chantal?
I guess I might just add the perspective that while it might take some time for the department to keep it updated, might it also make their jobs easier if people are following the process and not making mistakes and, you know, having everything they need on the first try instead of going back multiple times. I don't have a strong feeling either way, but I guess I would consider both of those perspectives before eliminating it.
Yeah, I think the general idea is a good one. Exactly how we make that work, it's going to vary from department to department, and it's really kind of an open-ended thing. I see a lot of this on the, looking at the town website and hearing people talk about their, difficulties in finding things on the website. There is an almost limitless number of things that people may want to figure out how to do, and having some how-tos, whether it's in the form of a page, a printed page, or something on the website. Yeah, it's to the extent that we can do that effectively, I think it's well worth doing. It's I'm sure it's going to be more complicated than it sounds. And we may want to tweak the wording of the action item somehow. But I think the idea of providing our citizens with more effective guidance on how to interact with the town, it's a good idea, I think, from a number of angles. And so I'd be very supportive of at least, again, maybe finding a better way to describe it or rethinking it a little bit. But the idea of providing folks, citizens with some effective guidance on how to interact with the town, it's a good idea, and I think it fits particularly well under the topic that we're discussing.
How do I do this?
Anne Marie.
You probably heard me saying, how do I do this? And try to find the raised hand. Yeah, I'm over here now reading it. I think it's fine. Obviously, each department, it could be up to their discretion as to how elaborate they get. And it's just a one pager. So it could be as little or as much as a department pleases. And I think it was Chantel's point or someone that mentioned it, perhaps it might make the department's life easier for them if folks know where they're to go. So I don't mind it as it's written, just my feedback.
Great.
Sort of tangential to this thought is that sometimes thinking through how to describe how to do X. Sometimes when you think through what the process is for someone who's trying to get something done with the town, you may find as you're thinking through it, you may find that, hey, we can make it easier for our citizens. So that while the idea that we're talking about is providing essentially some guidance and instructions to the citizens, the process of developing that may help us improve our processes.
Mm-hmm. Great. Sounds good. Well, I think those were the high level changes to quality of life. I left track changes on for the Dropbox version if you want to flip through and just see what changed without having to read the whole thing again. And this matrix is also available. But if there are no other comments on quality of life at the moment, perhaps we can move on.
Yeah, but I'm sure you'd be happy to take future comments as we, this is not yet cast in the stone, so it's still going to be a work in progress. So, as we continue to review and look look at the changes that you've already made, and some like I haven't looked at the very latest version. So yeah, I'm sure additional comments and suggestions will always be welcome, I hope, right up until the time we finally say this is done. But we're not there yet. Chantel had her hand up, and then Fiona.
On that note, sorry, just a quick remark here. If you do add more comments to this form, if you could let us know by email as well, so that we don't miss anything, so that we know to check and implement it as we edit the chapter, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, it would indeed. It would be helpful for you to know when somebody's made a suggestion.
Right.
Chantel.
That was most of my question, because like one of the recommendations that I had made, I would still suggest like a further wording change. But I don't know if, because this is a public process and a public meeting, if I should be mentioning it in front of the group, or if it's sufficient to put something in the spreadsheet. I guess that. So we're talking about like putting additional recommendations in, and this being sort of a live document. I just wasn't sure about that balance.
I mean, the copy editing process, at some point it becomes, it is a collective work. I'm not sure where that fits within public meeting law, but we as the consultant team will have to make some executive decisions on this, but we will also, we're happy to take individual comments. In my experience, this has never been a problem.
Okay.
Procedurally speaking, but yeah, we'll check on that to see if that's a problem, but in our experience, it's never been. But thanks for
Okay.
noting that.
Well, and I don't, so I do have a tiny tweak on one of the comments, and I can't scroll because you're sharing your screen and I have trouble having that many windows open at once. But just the one where we said, like, could we use resources instead of defense? And I might have been maybe not that clear, because it still says resource against, which still sort of has that feeling of like that battle and kind of going at each other. Instead of using something that's a little bit more like I think it was defense against rapid growth, or defense against, like the against also has that connotation along with defense. So
Thank you for catching. Yeah, that is probably not the message we want to send about growth. So thanks for catching that subtlety.
yeah, but that's an example of the kind of thing where I'm like, should I bring that up in a meeting or send it as a comment? And maybe it's just something we have to feel out a little bit more as we go.
I think it's absolutely fine to bring it up in a meeting. What we've done in the past, we've also opened the chapter up to copy edits from committee members. So that's also an option. But it's if you feel that the committee should weigh in on something that is consequential, especially something that has to do with the direction of development in Grafton, then yeah, that seems okay to us. Fiona, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to, just for your sanity, do you have a date, like a hard, like a cutoff date for when comments should be submitted by? Because obviously your team is going to need time to digest and incorporate and turn them around. And if they're kind of coming in piecemeal, it might be a little challenging for you folks.
Sarah, I'll defer to you on that, since you're putting in most of the effort in this chapter.
Well, we don't have a date to revisit quality of life yet, correct? We'll be focusing on the other chapters first.
I believe so, yes.
We would have a bit of time,
Okay.
I would say.
Okay, so we can just kind of take these as they come. More or
I'd
less.
Be fine with that.
Okay.
Anne Marie, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. This is similarly where I believe it was brought up previously, like there's that comment about the town of Spencer, and I just think like the lifetime for that, if we're looking at this document over 10 plus years, I appreciate like there's other towns that might be doing this better and they have done this, whatever the sizable audience on Facebook, but maybe that we don't mention those towns specifically, and just that we can always utilize other towns as a resource, period. And that's like on page 5 going into 6, or goal 1, I think, near the end of.
Right, the one about the cable access TV, right?
Yeah.
Yep, we'll remove that.
I suppose
phrase it as a best practice rather than mentioning Spencer. Sorry, David, go ahead.
Yeah, I suppose just as a matter of being careful about the open meeting law, if we are all interacting with these documents in between meetings, there is the potential for it to become a deliberation if one of us responds to a comment made by another one of us. And technically, that could be construed as a deliberation. So we do want to be a bit careful about that. It's one thing for Elena and Sarah and company to be collecting comments from committee members in between meetings. It's another thing for the committee members to be seeing other committee members' comments and then possibly reacting to them. So that's just the caution about being a public body and engaging in things that could become deliberation in between meetings.
Any other comments on quality of life before we move on to transportation? Anne Marie?
Hi, thank you. And sorry I didn't fill out the form, but I don't digest this, I think, as other people do. But I just had a comment on assessing the action item, assess current barriers to volunteerism, and that's page number 6 going into 7. And I know there's a comment here about the exit survey, and that could be a good idea, but I don't know, just that that paragraph, and I don't recall us talking about it previously, like ensure that volunteer positions are not harmed. I mean, I understand excluded, but I'm not sure about harmed. Perhaps it's my interpretation. And then, looking at options to provide stipends, the length of meetings. I'm just not sure if that's like in the scope of this committee necessarily. But yeah, just I'm not going to live or die by it, but just some comments, I guess, in general for me. I think it's just those two things, kind of the notion of harm in addition to, stipends and somehow that we would be able to change the amount or length of meetings as part of this document. I'm not entirely sure if I see that in here. That's all. Thanks.
Oh,
Yes, I had the same concerns as Anne Marie does, especially stipends. But I agree with Anne Marie. We need to look at that a little bit more carefully, because I really don't agree with the stipends at all. But we just need to think about it some more, I think.
And my thought is just that it might not be something that's in this document necessarily. That's not to say that it's not something that, for example, on the select board, I'm working on more concise meetings, less meetings, those types of things. But yeah, just kind of the way I'm looking at it, I suppose.
So is your concern that the town doesn't have the capacity for stipends? Or is it that it's not within the purview of the master plan to look into these executive decisions that the town would normally make or individual boards might make?
Yeah, it's almost twofold, but in this respect, sorry, I'm jumping in, Sue, but
That's okay.
specific for this, that it wouldn't be under the purview of this particular document when all was said and done, because that could be something that should be living, right? There are times where one committee may be more tasked and may have to have more meetings and longer meetings, et cetera, down the line. And then, but on the flip side, I would say that I would agree with your second statement as well, but perhaps the better answer for this is that I don't feel that it's under the purview of the master plan.
Thank you.
Chantal.
Am I unmuted or oh yeah, I'm unmuted. Okay. So I just maybe there's just a way to open it up a little more, because I think the concept of encouraging volunteerism and the idea of many hands make light work, and that it doesn't need to always be the same people on all the committees, that conceptually those things do feel like they fit very much in the master plan document. But I understand certainly why people might be reacting to some of the specific things, like telling committees they need to shorten their meetings, or that the town, like where it seems like we're always strapped for cash trying to find money for stipends. But there may be a way to just tweak that sentence so that it's a little bit more generic in terms of assessing ways and identifying the ones that work best for us, kind of a thing. I don't know if that sort of helps to resolve that concern. I did also want to ask a little bit about the intent of that first sentence and kind of where it was coming from, because the sentence in its entirety seems like it's protecting volunteers. It says, when efforts are made to diversify boards and committees, town leaders must ensure the people in volunteer positions are not harmed or excluded. So that was how I was reading that. I guess I'm just curious, like, what the intent was in that sentence and how we might be able to address it in a way that makes more sense, if that.
And if I can jump in, that absolutely. So I'm not against the notion of this. I think just the specificity, if I can get that out, is maybe the issue for me. And agree that I feel that just that first sentence is quite loaded, and it almost makes you ask, wow, where's this coming from? What happened?
I think it makes I think it looks like volunteerism in a negative way. I think it needs to be a little bit more generic, and let it can stay in the master plan, but I think it needs to be a little bit more generic, and those who are in charge of doing this can come up with some ways of bettering volunteerism. I just didn't understand volunteer positions not to be harmed or excluded. Can you give me an example of volunteers being harmed or excluded? I'm not sure if I understand that.
Is it appropriate for me to chime in? This came from the master plan survey, as some people did comment they did not feel safe in volunteer positions in Grafton. When we're talking about like mentally safe, not necessarily physically safe, but in ways that we could be more inclusive in town policies through, so that harmed is really thinking about different things that could be difficult for people, especially feeling excluded, feeling like their voice isn't heard, especially in town politics. So this isn't necessarily meant to call people out or make volunteering sound difficult, but just to be wary of sometimes things could be hurtful in different committees for volunteering. I know I felt it in my own hometown, definitely not on purpose. So we can definitely take out harmed and leave excluded, if that makes more sense in this sentence. But we are talking about, I'm being careful about, I hate to say feelings because it sounds smaller, but I think it is very important.
Yeah, I think one concern has been, the pushback from social media that prevents people from volunteering on boards. This is sort of a common concern with residents, and this is regional, it's not just Grafton. So that was something else we kind of indirectly wanted to put in there, but maybe we need to work on the language a little bit more.
Yeah, it really sounds too negative to me. That's just my opinion, especially not harmed. I think it needs to be reworded somehow, that town leaders must ensure people in volunteer positions are equally what?
Maybe protected?
Protected, yeah, something like that.
Something along those lines. And I almost wonder if it's worth kind of having a a small mini conversation just about this at some point. I don't know, because I kind of get where you're going now with that first sentence in terms of people being afraid to volunteer because, you know, if you're on the Board of Health and you're the person who had to tell everybody to wear masks during COVID, maybe now people are, you know, spray painting your, I mean, that's an obvious one because it's illegal, but I get where you're coming from there. Now people might be concerned to step up because they're concerned about sort of harassment and blowback and like those kinds of things. And I think like a lot of people on this board are in fairly public positions in their current roles and probably have a pretty good understanding of that concept for sure. So I like the idea of having something in there to make sure that our volunteers feel safe and that they're going to be protected in some way, shape, or form from, you know, some of that vitriol, but I understand why the sentence didn't quite read that way up front.
I changed it to equally protected, keeping that more positive language, but we can look at this paragraph as a whole too.
Anne Marie?
I was about to put my hand down, but I was thinking words like comfortable or supported, something like that, comfortable and supported as other language. I mean, additionally, I don't know where, you know, who or how many people made this, you know, reference this, but if it is related to social media, I mean, maybe that's the statement. And hopefully by the time this is done, there's fewer and fewer people using social media, thank God. So maybe we'll get to the point where that's not going to be an issue at all. But all right, that's all. Thanks.
Bob Carroll, your hand is up.
I just have a kind of topology question and construction. So when I read this, and then, you know, when you put all these together, and they're going to be in a big document, the way the sections are laid out, you have goals and objectives. And then following that, you have another section, goals. And I get that, you know, the goal more of a discussion, right? And kind of go up to the next level. But you're gonna go through the whole thing. And then that's where I was like, when I went to the town services one, I saw the same thing. But what's the reasoning and why is it laid out that way?
Bob, I couldn't entirely hear your question, but I think I heard a question about the structure and the layout of the chapter.
Yeah,
And
so you have the section goals and objectives, right? Which is a section heading, right? And then you have the following section is goals, where you do the discussion of the goals and objectives. So why wouldn't you put them together? Because when you combine these all in a big document, you're gonna be jumping back and forth when one sees the table of contents at the beginning.
if I understand correctly what you're asking, I think one of them is sort of a table of contents. So it's more like a summary of the goals where they're all laid out as a reference. And then as you move further, the goals and objectives and action items are expanded into a narrative. Did I understand your question correctly? It seems like it's a duplicate of the same title.
The objectives and then have a goal and then the whole discussion around the goal, right? It's a big frogging back and forth. And then that's a question, not recommendation. Why did you do it that way?
Again, I'm not sure if I understood entirely what you said, but so one of them is meant to be more like a table of contents of all the goals and action items. So there's that list. And then the next section, goals and strategies, it's the same ones, but they're expanded and quote unquote defended. Each one of these goals is explained. Let me know if that answers your question.
Right, why did you do it like that?
As opposed to,
just have goals and objectives, and each goal have a discussion around each goal in that particular section.
Oh, I see. We can easily do it that way. One of them is a summary. And we can even call it table of contents to avoid any confusion. We're not done formatting this, but we could have
Maybe we'll just leave
single
the
title.
piece at the end. That's not a big deal. It was just when I compared and contrasted this with the town services one with the quality of life. Like when you put these all together, you're going to jump back and forth, right? You're going to have both objectives, then goals and objectives again, and goals for each distinct section. And we have 16 sections.
If I can hop in, Bob, I think the idea is that if what you're interested in looking at is goal 3, then you can go to the goal 3 section for the details. This sort of allows you to not have to read through the entire document every time you want to look at something. So I definitely get where you're coming from, because the way we've been reviewing it, it feels very duplicative. But I think the long-term vision is that you're going to be able to look at that original list of goals and objectives, and you're going to say, okay, I want to see this action item around assessing public meeting processes to determine measures, and I want to see more detail on that. So you're going to go specifically to that section instead of having to like pick through all of the details for everything, if that makes sense. It's very much like Elena had said, a table of contents.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Thanks for explaining. Yeah, that's the intent, basically, to aid the reader in understanding the structure of what's coming up. And we'll, if it's confusing in any way, we'll, rephrase those titles as we format this chapter, so we can look at these options when we actually design the chapters in InDesign and see if they're easy to read.
Yeah, I would say, sort of leave this as a bit of an open issue that I'm more concerned right now about the substance of the, not entirely, but getting the substance down. There's a bit of, how best to arrange it for reading that, for instance, you might contemplate that summary of goals and objectives and action items being the end of the chapter, the summary portion of it. So, here's all the detail, but just skip to the end if you want to see the summary. It's another possibility, but yeah, I don't know that I want to worry. I mean, let's keep that in mind, but that is something that, rearranging things is something that can be done, sort of almost anywhere on, throughout the process. Fiona?
Yeah, I agree, Mr. Chair. I also just want to maybe perhaps it's already 8, so I would you want to try and get to the transportation chapter too without being here until 10 o'clock. So if we could, I think we have a good path forward. We'll obviously, CMRPC will continue to kind of get comments as they trickle in. But yeah, I mean, I think I agree. I think the formatting and that, like, we'll revisit it. And we have a future opportunities to kind of talk further. Not to cut anybody off or anything. It's a good discussion, but I just want to make sure we get to the transportation as well.
Yep, and just sort of I think final comment on the quality of life chapter goes back to that discussion we just had about the assessing current barriers. I think we had a fairly lengthy discussion in which we got a better sense of what the idea was behind the way it was written, and some ideas for rewriting it. So I think we, you guys can take what we've discussed and come up with what you think is a better wording. We can think about what we've discussed and come back at the next, our next opportunity to review revised wording and see if see how how well our revised wording reflects what we think we understood this to mean, and continue to work on it if necessary. It's a topic that I know I don't know off the top of my head, even after a bit of discussion, what I think would best represent the idea here. So, if we keep going at it now, we'll be spinning our wheels. So let's take what we've discussed and build on that for a future further review.
Thank you all for your comments. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague Eric, who can walk us through the main points in the transportation chapter.
Hi all, is someone gonna share their screen? Sarah? Cool, lovely. Have you guys gone through this already, or are you seeing it for the first time?
This will be the first time, Eric.
All right, cool. So we started off with an overview, describes what the transportation system is and the importance of it. Yeah, we can just move to key findings. A key finding was increased frequency and lower cost of commuter rail could increase ridership among Grafton residents. That was a common item that kept getting brought up in the master plan survey. From the data was people didn't really use the trains all too often. I know when I did the ridership numbers and back when they published it in 2018, the average onboarding in Grafton was like 28 people. And every average deboarding was like 27 during rush hour. So those are low numbers. But again, that's from 2018. So things have gone crazy and who knows what they're at now. Another key finding, residents support improvements that increase walkability and pedestrian connections. Grafton has a good amount of trails and sidewalks, and they want to see more of the same. The common was a pretty big issue, parking, connections to that. Zoom in. So yeah, just going off that, we can continue to go down. Lack of infrastructure as a barrier to transportation in Grafton. It's a car-centric town, as you guys probably know. Most people use their cars to get around. And that can create backups, especially on 140 and 122. Can we go back to the most dangerous road real quick? Oh, Fiona, you have a question?
Yeah, Eric, I just wanted to make a note that I've been trying to coordinate with the police chief for a good amount of time now we have speed monitors along main thoroughfares in town.
Right.
Namely 140. And I'm working with him to try and get, there's like an app that you can download and get the data. I am going to get that to you because I think that will bolster what you're about to discuss right now. I just want you to know.
That would be lovely. We're actually working with the city of Worcester to get their data from the same machines. But actually, I'm just gonna quick note. I drive through Grafton all the time for work. So I see what's going on. And I want to just say, there is good traffic calming. There are good elements to a safe transportation network within Grafton. Some of the areas that I noticed, there were no like crash clusters, but some of that were HSIP eligible. So that's Highway Safety Improvement Program. So they would need an estimated property damage score of 135, but that's kind of getting into the weeds. But some of the problem areas in town are near the high school, that intersection, coming down the hill, by the ice cream place. I don't know the road name, but it's the 122, 140 merge.
Yeah.
And I posited that a factor that we have in terms of the crashes there are you have the high school, a lot of people driving, you have the housing authority. So you're having older drivers rather, and younger drivers kind of meeting and merging right there. then you have that crazy Dunkin' Donuts with the two
Mhm.
buildings, and everybody's just trying to get onto that road in that whole area. And so
Right.
that's where you're and from there to the Stop and Shop, that's where you see you're also like a pedestrian cluster for higher like crashes. So for me, just as someone who drives through Grafton, who uses the transportation system, that whole 122, 140 stretch is probably the area you guys want to look at the most. Is
Mhm.
Carroll Road near like Tufts kind in Westboro by the commuter traffic, as in people commuting or not to the commuter rail? Sorry, just want to.
Yeah, it is somewhat nearby. Yeah.
Can I?
Okay.
Yeah, I guess yeah, heading in toward, heading north, yeah, that direction. So it's probably a poor explanation.
And Mr. Holt can comment on that.
Can I make a comment?
Okay, Johnson. Okay.
Yeah, so Carroll Road is one of the main roads to get to the commuter rail. And what they do is they go down Carroll Road, they take a right onto Bicknell, and then they take a left onto North Street, meet up with Weston Street. Okay, and then from there, Institute Road, or go by Tufts the opposite direction. So, or by Willard Clark Museum, I forget the name of that road. But both of those directions will get you to the actual train. So, and yeah, it's a very busy, and you living on Carroll Road for as many years, 20+ years. What I have noticed is that since the commuter rail, there is a line of traffic, coming down that hill from Carroll Road that is very much a lot heavier. It goes back a lot further than it used to, put it that way. For you to try to get through that intersection during the busy times, during the commuting times. So it's in that respect. And that's one of the areas that I kind of said, okay, this is why we need sidewalks on Carroll Road, because we've got a lot of commuting traffic going on there. But that's my 2 cents. I hope that helps.
It does help. Actually, I just have a quick question about the MBTA station. When the traffic build up? I know that's like a pretty sharp turn to get into that station. Is that a
I haven't
congestion
noticed
point
that.
within town?
I haven't noticed that big. Of course, I don't go there all the time during the busy times. So I wouldn't really know to give you that kind of an answer.
Okay.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
particular, the Pine Street Westboro Road intersection, we have current traffic studies that have been done or are being done for some development projects that will be contributing traffic to that intersection. So those traffic studies for those projects, and Fiona can point you to the details offline here, but those traffic studies will tell you quite a lot about what's currently going on at that particular intersection that's right next to the T station.
Yes, so Eric, just to elaborate on that, that intersection is running the risk of a level of service F rating. So not ideal. There's a need for pavement markings and kind of like lower scale kind of implementation items that are probably, relatively like cost effective compared to, but there's also like larger scale improvements that been required, and I'll forward you the information, but signalization and those type of things has been proven to be warranted there.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
We can continue going down. So just talking about the commute times have increased over time. I mean, that just makes sense as Grafton has kind of gone into the Boston sphere of influence. So we can continue. Commute times. Yeah, if you guys have anywhere you want to stop and discuss anything as we're scrolling, if any numbers stick out to you, just feel free to say anything and we can go through it. All right, I think goals and objectives would be a nice spot to get to. So improve safety on Grafton's road network for all users, especially on the priority areas listed on the master plan. I mean, that just follows the Vision Zero process of reducing roadway fatalities for all users. So that's a great goal, right to the point. And so that's all. If we go up, that's kind of just talking about like the crash data I was mentioning before about the EPDO. And you're seeing Grafton Center, North Grafton, South Grafton. Okay, yeah, everything. So sorry if I'm rambling, guys, but the new numbers for 2019 to 2021 were just released, so maybe that's something we want to look at in updating. But yeah.
Yeah, I would just make a note, Eric. I mean, I'm always an advocate for, you know, whatever current numbers we can, especially because the lifespan of this document is going to be, you know, a minimum 10 years. So whatever we can kind of capture, that'd be great.
Yeah, they were just officially released like a week or two ago, and so
Yeah, don't you hate that? You wrote the whole
Yeah,
chapter and then been there.
but yeah, so as I was mentioning, the bicyclist cluster and the pedestrian crash cluster were in that 140, 122 area, where all the stuff seems to go down outside of the mill area in North Grafton. Those are like really the two hot spots in town. But yeah, we can continue to go down. Improving traffic calming and improving sight lines.
One comment right here.
Yep.
The third paragraph appears to be talking specifically about the town common area, but it doesn't say so in so many words. It really, it should be, it should be a little bit clearer, because just above, you know, we're talking about other areas as well. So that's that paragraph seems to be addressing specifically the common area.
Okay.
And it's just good to write that in a way that makes it clear to the reader that this is the area we're talking about. And a minor detail, Hunter's Grill and Tap is no longer in operation.
That's always a problem with doing these things.
The mix of businesses in the area is it changes over time. So it's hard to hard to write this in a manner that will survive the test of time.
Very true. One thing that I don't think I actually noted in the transportation chapter that I just thought of is the amount of parking at the library is a great resource for the downtown commons. And I don't know if there's ample signage pointing to that huge lot. And I know that people who are going to the Common Grafton Country Store on Common Cow, if you're trying to back out of those spots at like 5:30 on a Saturday to enter traffic, or not 5:30 on a weekday, you better hope someone's very nice and lets you back out from those off-street parking.
Yes, parking around the common is a well-known pain point. Brian.
Yeah, I was just going to mention to your point, Dave, about Hunter's Bar and Grill is not there any longer, but the restaurant itself, I think it was purchased. I think that is maybe an ongoing concern going forward, as you know, as a restaurant. And also you've got the library that's right next to that. I don't know if we mentioned that at all. That does have a lot of traffic that goes in and out of the library. Cumberland Farms. You have the post office. It's just off of 140 as well. So a lot of destinations in that general area, you know, in terms of businesses and transactions and so forth. So just my comment.
Anne Marie. Yeah, you probably don't want this paragraph to purport to be an exhaustive list of all the interesting things, locations over in the area of the common that people might go to.
Yeah, I think the downtown area could definitely use an expansion of the sidewalks, maybe even up to like Wong's restaurant on 140. I think that just makes sense, serve those houses there. Is the library not open to residents visiting the commons? I would assume that's public parking and
Apparently,
People do use, oh, sorry, I think I cut someone off.
I was just gonna say, my understanding is apparently, was it explained to me by the previous library director, it might change with the new person, but the grant funding, they're not able to open it to the public necessarily. So when it first opened, there were signs there indicating so. Those signs have been removed, but I think it's somewhat unclear.
that's a real shame. That's a pretty large
Yep.
lot close.
Yep.
I've
It's
heard,
something that could be mitigated. So it'd be great if the master plan could try to facilitate that.
I think that's worth to look into for the library, but I had heard that people could use the library, especially when there's concerts and the library has the capability. It's a big lot. And that people could park there. So unless they put signs up saying you can't, I would assume you can.
Fiona, your hand is up.
Yeah, so I just wanted to confirm that so MassDOT is doing a sidewalk extension project through from in Upton through Grafton along 140, and improvements are slated. I believe that's up on their website. Eric, so just so you know, there is a plan to do sidewalks. We have a project in town that's going through the public hearing process. That's as part of, their submission to the town. They did say that they would also fill in the gap. So like, along the frontage of their property, they would add to the sidewalks, that the improvements that MassDOT is doing if they were to get their permit. But we can't hang our hat on it because we don't obviously know if that's going to happen. But just so you're aware that there is sidewalk work through along 140 up to the railroad tracks there. And there's one of the select board goals is to analyze the traffic patterns of the common. And we're actively trying to move that along. We did apply for a grant, we have yet to hear back for a consulting firm to analyze the area, really focusing on traffic and circulation, not as much parking, because just spatially we're quite limited. It's a historic district, and we only have so much that we can work with without kind of like taking away like the available green space and whatnot. So just for your own know-how, those are two things that are in progress.
And some of these topics are touched on farther down in this chapter of the master plan. And ultimately, the master plan is going to have some action items that correspond to activities that the town is already undertaking or is already planning to undertake. So no surprise if we say the master plan says we need to do more with sidewalks. Well, we've got several activities that are going to be addressing that.
Awesome. We can continue. Yeah, let's just prioritize road intersection improvements in areas anticipating high density development. We can go back up real quick. So I thought I had listed some of the developments coming online that were approved, but are we seeing the most future development probably around the train station with the closing or in destruction of what the hospital there or whatever was there before?
No.
No. Okay.
Fiona?
I would say that North Grafton area is definitely getting a lot of attention, but there is development like throughout town. Yeah, we have the 124 Westboro Road, that warehouse project. We've got our 5 Millennia. I can go through the list, but I don't want to like bore everybody here. and we can like connect offline about it, but there are, North Grafton is definitely getting attention. There's that project that I was talking about previously, that's where Central Grafton, there's movement in parts of South Grafton as well, not as much, but yeah, but development is scattered.
Yeah, and farther down the road, projects that we don't yet know about. One of the outcomes of the master plan here is going to be some form of assessment or description of where in Grafton future development is likely to occur. In particular, we have yet to begin answering this question in the context of the master plan, but ultimately we're going to be pointing to some potential opportunities for higher density development. I can't say, and I don't think anybody can say right now where those might be, but that's and in fact, it may be that the master plan won't be able to zero in on any particular locations very much. But I think we have to anticipate that there will be additional development that we don't yet know about. We don't yet know where it's going to be. So there's a bit of a limit to what we can say around future development and where traffic improvements might need to occur.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we'll address some of those issues in the land use chapter, so that will be an opportunity to revisit this topic.
And just looking at that table below the crash clusters again, 135 is the score needed to be eligible for highway safety improvement program funding. It's a pretty good thing, I would say, that Grafton doesn't have a lot of clusters, and the clusters they do have are not the highest scoring. So congratulations, Grafton. We can continue. Yeah, just trying to find as many grant programs as you can to improve safety and get things paid for, I think makes sense.
We do have safe routes. I just got we do have safe routes to school in place. There's a couple of projects that were done through that program. I'm not as well versed in that. DPW that's definitely there. They've worked with that very closely. We do have a tier 2 complete streets prioritization plan in place. We haven't applied for tier 3 funding. There's, obviously, multiple opportunities to apply, but I need to meet with DPW about that. But if we could nod to that too, kind of throughout that's available.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Sarah, can you just write a comment on that? We can.
Yeah, complete streets is mentioned farther down in this document.
Okay. Sorry, I did not read all of this.
No worries.
So
I last looked at it seems like a week ago, and so
yeah.
Did we get this prior to today?
Yeah, this Anne Marie, yeah, it was uploaded to the meeting materials. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
An action item that implements speed management to realize safer speeds, so lowering speeds throughout town. Traffic calming measures, all pretty standard boilerplate stuff that makes sense. As was alluded, common to a study as for parking safety and transportation convenience around the common. I guess Fiona's already on the ball with that.
Yeah, we're already on this one.
Yeah, so that's awesome, and we can update that to reflect that if you guys want. When will that be done? After this master plan, assumably, right?
So, yeah, I guess it's kind of tough because we'll be finding out later on this year if we even got the award So it's like, I'm almost like reluctant to like exclude it
Yeah, I don't really
entirely in case you
wanna
don't get it.
allude to it, and yeah, if you guys don't, yeah.
No, I definitely want to, I would leave this in as an action item. By the time we're at the end of developing this document, for each action item, we will be assigning it, among other things, a time frame and a priority. So this is an action item, we might say it's already in progress. By the time we've got this document published, we can say, it's going to be done within a year or something like that. And I mean, I'm just, just throwing out the idea. It's definitely an action that the town wants to take, needs to take. And it's something that we already have the wheels in motion for it. That doesn't mean it does not mean that we don't include it in the plan.
Achieving a state of good repair, having good, safe roads to drive on. The majority of Grafton's federal aid eligible roads were in good or excellent condition. So again, good job on your DPW. Yeah, we can.
And Eric, if
Yeah.
you just want to, instead of going through each action item, just in the interest of time, maybe do some select action item. And I would put this question to the committee. If there's one particular action item that you want us to discuss, we'll try to address it, just to be mindful of the time and to make sure we capture all of your
Yeah, not a problem. So I'll open that up to the committee. Is there any action items? Sidewalks, all right. So looks like the majority of the sidewalks are good or fair. I know there might be a disconnect. I think bike lanes are a great idea. This is kind of just me speaking personally. With e-bikes becoming so popular, I read an article that high school age kids are kind of putting off getting their license and are opting towards e-bikes. Just something to think about. You could probably reduce a lot of cars on the road as parents or kids go into the high school, middle school, if they were riding their bikes, if that infrastructure, and they don't even have to be e-bikes, but if that infrastructure existed. I know I've seen on 140 just driving through a high school age person riding their BMX bike on the shoulder as opposed to the sidewalk. And it's really not clear as to what you're supposed to do in that situation as the cyclist if you're not in your road bike gear on the sidewalk. But yeah, I think sidewalks and other pedestrian infrastructure is a great action item and could really be expanded. And so it's awesome that Upton is, or 140 from Upton to Grafton is getting sidewalks. I know people fly down that stretch and people will be able to walk to Silver Lake.
And keep in mind too that what we're seeing on the screen right now is under the goal of keeping roads and sidewalks in good repair. It's not about expanding the sidewalk network, which is probably, I think that shows up under goal 3 of expanding multimodal. So Fiona?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I can't understand, from staff, and I know staff aren't supposed to weigh in too much. I don't want to sway the working group or anything, but sidewalks are hugely important for obvious reasons. The town has made a really concerted effort to try and expand sidewalks. DPW has been working really hard, including the new park that was approved along North Street and creating sidewalk connections from the park to the school through into the common. So that'll be a huge win for the town. Obviously, the work along 140 will be great. And then we have some work that's going on in the Whitney Park, 5 Mill Street Park area. And then a lot of other folks have come. I've just noticed that there's a trend of folks kind of coming forward, expressing desire to improve not only, the roadways, but sidewalk infrastructure. And there's a bunch of great work that was done in South Grafton along Millbury that it looks great down there. So I just want to underscore that, sidewalks are huge, and walkability is obviously a priority. And just from a safety perspective, and it's also a sort of traffic calming measure. But with that comes the consideration of, as sidewalks expand, a sidewalk maintenance program or something to that nature, so we can keep them in good condition. Something to consider.
Fiona, is there a list of, we may try to create a map of recent completed public works projects and proposed. Is there a list of what has been achieved in the past decade, let's say, that we could use to map?
There should be something, because DPW, everything has to go through them, especially if they need to do any like takings for easements or anything like that. So I'll check see if they have a list. But the upcoming projects are the the 5 through Mill Street, the Mill Street area, and North Street, and Upton, or 140 rather. But yes, I will to get that list.
Any road that is going to be eligible for the TIP or TIP funding, if they're going to do resurfacing, repaving, they're going to be adding sidewalks or improving the sidewalks that are there. That's pretty much how they do it.
TIP funding is state roads.
Yeah.
Right. Not local.
Yeah, correct. State
Okay.
But yeah, so 122A was a TIP project and benefited from that.
Yeah, they did a great job.
If you want to move on, that's already 8:30. Moving into goal 3 about encouraging multimodal transportation. That's where this increased miles of sidewalk comes in. Complete streets comes in there, I think. But the first part of that on WRTA, it would be helpful for there to be a map showing the WRTA routes, although you get a fair idea just from reading the text you've already got. But it really needs to be emphasized that the WRTA routes are not, I mean, there's a lot of text in here, the ridership numbers and all that sort of makes it clear, but the WRTA is not particularly useful for most Grafton residents. And like I think it would help to show a map of where they are. And while the text here talks about a connection to Worcester, the connection, while it technically exists, my assessment of it is it's laughably unusable. You can for example, you can board the beach shuttle at the Common, take it down to South Grafton, get off there, get on the A shuttle over to the shops at Blackstone Valley, get off there, and then take a bus into Worcester. Now that's just, while yes, you can get to Worcester from there, it doesn't make much sense. And you'd have to be desperate, I guess, to do that. And I guess that just sort of, I don't want us to give the impression that we think we've got great multimodal service here in Grafton, because we don't. We have an extremely limited amount of multimodal service, and you include, that ties into sidewalks and bike lanes as well, other potential modes of transportation. But the WRTA topic, it's worthwhile explaining clearly what it is and what it isn't. Just to make it clear that,
David, would you, Chantel, I know you have your hand up, but David, would you mind putting what you just said in a comment to make sure we capture that? Because this is, it's coming from someone who knows the place well, and where, the areas that are not served. So if you could leave a comment on the form, that would be really helpful.
Yes, I haven't yet put in any comments on the transportation section, but I will certainly include that, because that's kind of one of my things about Grafton is the realization that Grafton is, and you've mentioned it, it's been mentioned already tonight, that Grafton is a car-centric, it's a place where you basically, with very few exceptions, you cannot survive in Grafton without a car. I would love to change that, but I don't see a path over the next 10 to 20 years where we can make any real progress towards getting away from being as automobile centric as we are. Chantel.
My question was mostly whether or not we're going to get a spreadsheet to add comments into, because I didn't see anywhere I looked at this earlier today and didn't see anywhere to put that. So should it go in, like, is there going to be another tab for this in the spreadsheet we've been using? Should we go into the main page? Like what?
Yeah, that main page is perfect because there's that
Okay.
column to say which chapter you're referring
Just
to.
which chapter?
Mhm.
Because to add to that thought, like I get where you're coming from, Dave, that we're not going to be able to fix it maybe in this master plan, but if we don't like take any steps to move it forward, then 20 years we're going to be in the same spot. So like I'd love, and I think it was mentioned here somewhere, you know, I don't know how it was decided where the WRTA was going to stop in Grafton, and perhaps since that original decision was made, maybe there might be other points that make sense. Maybe at some point it does make sense to have a direct transport from Grafton, you know, from the common into Worcester. Both maybe for people to be able to come out and enjoy the common and for, you know, people to go in. So maybe some discussion around assessing what exists and comparing it against maybe what an ideal situation might look like. I'm not sure that's the right answer. I'm getting a little fried, but but
Yeah, it's
kind of
right.
keeping
It
something
is
like that
getting
in
there,
here
but
would make
yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I certainly want us to propose what we can in this plan to move towards a more multimodal transportation network in town. I know we're not going to get there, but if we don't find something to do, you know, it's going to be static. And in connection with the comments that had just been made, one of my comments on one of the action items under this topic is, and it's probably worth being a little bit more explicit about that than the current text is to determine where future bus stops and routes need to be in order to be more usable. Where, in other words, try to find out where people might like to go on a bus and where would it be practical to provide bus stops. If we go way back in time, way before my time here in Grafton, probably even before I was alive, Grafton had a trolley, a trolley that, as I recall hearing it described, went at least from the common up Worcester Street and into Worcester. You know, you could actually ride a tram from Grafton into Worcester, you know, maybe 100 years ago. And we're not going to bring that back, obviously, but we do need to be thinking, you know, we need to be realistic about where we are and how difficult it's going to be to make any progress in this direction. But we need to identify as many ways as we can, what can we do to begin taking steps in the direction of reducing our automobile dependency?
Yeah, I totally agree. And just speaking onto the WRTA, their shuttle services aren't really super utilized. They're the Grafton service. These two shuttles are the lowest ridership among any of the routes in the WRTA service. I believe they operate as a flag system outside of Worcester. Nobody knows what that is. They don't do a great job educating people that you can flag down one of their buses going by and it could pick you up. I was just working with Southbridge and Dudley about their shuttle services. There's no bus stops anywhere, not even signage. Nobody really knows what's going on. So people are intimidated. There's barriers to entry to using the bus. And it's a real shame because it's currently free. And some people really could really make use of it. But to your point, it doesn't really go anywhere. It's so convoluted at this point, and it's definitely might be worth talking to the WRTA and trying to figure out these problems.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of work to be done here, but there is at least something exists, and hopefully we can improve. One of the other comments I had on reading through this was, maybe a part of this increasing ridership idea is to make bus stops more visible, maybe signage. You mentioned the total lack of, maybe even if we have a fixed bus stop with a shelter or a bench. Yeah, because right now I wouldn't even know where to go to catch the bus if I wanted to catch it.
I think that's the biggest complaint with the WRTA shuttles, and I don't want to speak for the WRTA, but I think they might have a hesitation about installing shelters at some of these locations. I don't know if it's not their property. I don't know why
Anyway,
exactly it is.
Yeah, we're not going to solve this problem tonight, but I think in what you've already written, you've kind of identified, and we can probably add a little bit more detail. But I think we want to make it clear what the service is, what it isn't, and what paths forward can we imagine.
No, I agree with that totally.
Did anyone else want to talk about specific action items or objectives not discussed? Obviously, this is the first time we're talking about this in a session, so we'll have an opportunity to see it again and then add comments. But just because we're getting close to over time here, so I just want to make sure if there's any final comments or thoughts, so Eric can start incorporating.
One other thing under the multimodal goal, there was an objective about connectivity. I don't remember exactly how it was worded, but there were no action items under that objective. Okay. So I was wondering whether there were some action items that would be applicable here. I mean, it may be that other action items already listed also address this, in which case we don't need to repeat them. And one of the things, a minor pet peeve of mine on the old master plan was we had some action items or recommendations, as they termed them, were listed under 2 or 3, or even I think maybe one case was 4 different objectives or 4 different goals. So they showed up several times in the list of recommendations. And that's, that is, I mean, again, that's more in how we summarize the whole thing. And once we structure our final set of action items. But I just, couldn't think of anything offhand of, well, what action items could we take to improve first and last mile connectivity? But it's something that's clearly of interest. It's part of this idea of making multimodal transportation more usable.
I think that needs.
Think about action items for this.
Yeah, or that it's in itself, it could be an action item. If we can break it into parts that need to be implemented, it in itself, that is implementable enough that it could be an action item. I will defer to Eric because he is our transportation expert, but we're definitely.
We could definitely make it into an action item. We could do, yeah.
Thanks for catching that, Dave.
Yeah, and just one more comment I'll make, and this is, on a related topic, commuter rail. It also needs to be made clear that we understand that commuter rail in Grafton is useful if you work in Boston or if you're going to events in Boston. It's not particularly useful to, say, go shopping. I'm not going to take the commuter rail to go shopping. There's no destination there that makes it worth my while. So unlike the T in Boston, where you can get, or you can do a lot, you know, between the bus and the T, the subway, the light, whatever else you want to call it. And there's a term for it that I can't think of off the top of my head, but you know, if you live there in Boston, Cambridge, those areas, you know, you can get a lot done. You can go to a lot of places of interest just by hopping on the bus or the T. That's not true for the commuter rail. So while the commuter rail is definitely a value in town, we don't want to be thinking that it's more than what it is.
Right, and you know, David, the comments in the survey reflect what you said. Most people who talked about using the commuter rail either worked in Boston at some point or used it to go to Boston.
Yep.
Regionally, it doesn't really, they don't use it to go to Worcester. George, you had your hand up. I want to make sure we get a comment from you.
I was gonna say that, you kind of contradict what I was gonna say, which is you go to Worcester. But, you know, they do have the park there now, the Worcester Park. They're building a lot of buildings, hopefully, that they're gonna actually get filled with people. And there is a good restaurant scene down there as well. So maybe things pick up in Worcester. It has, it's beginning to get a bit of a vibe, and also, becoming more popular, I think, with all the kind of renaissance, if you will, going on around town. But that's not for me to say. It's just an observation. So that's it. So,
Thank
So
you.
this is really our first introduction as a committee to the transportation chapter. So and there may be more comments yet to be, you know, to made tonight. I don't want to cut it off completely at this point, but this is the first chance a lot of us had to read and discuss it. So as I think was mentioned earlier, you know, you guys will be taking comments on this now, and I certainly encourage everybody to read it, think about it, comment on it.
Thank you. We'll be making revisions and revisit this at some point, much like we did with quality of life and the way we'll do with town services. But thank you all for your comments.
Yep. So anything more we want to talk about tonight as far as town services and natural and cultural resources? Those are the two things mentioned on the agenda as up next.
I just want to, CMRPC deadlines for comments for transportation. Do we want to give the committee some time?
Eric, let me know what you think. So for the next meeting, we'll have open space and recreation. That will be the next chapter in the pipeline. And we could do what we did this time. We'll try to be a bit more efficient with time, but we could revisit town services. And then the month after, we could revisit transportation if that works for you.
I'm sorry, say that one more time for me. I didn't write it down.
So I'm just thinking of our time limitations, but we could
Right.
revisit transportation in the next month.
Mhm.
But we're also revisiting town services. And we're discussing open space and recreation as a new chapter, so we could do a very compressed version. It's always challenging to compress our comments and discussion, but we could do open space, new chapter, town services, revisions, and transportation revisions at the next meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, my thought is because we've already had so much substantive discussion about town services and transportation to date, to see what loops we can close on those chapters. And yeah, similar to what we did this evening with transportation, have like a little bit of high level overview of kind of the content as it is, some major takeaways, then we delve into the next, September meeting. If that makes sense for the timeline, that's just my thought.
And just keep in mind that our regular schedule would have the August meeting on the 5th, which is 3 weeks from today.
Right. Okay, sounds good. Alrighty, well, thank you all very much.
All right, if there is nothing else that we need to discuss tonight, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded that this meeting be adjourned. Let's see, Mr. Carroll,
Carol's eye.
Ms. Duval. I think Susan Duval may have already left the meeting. Ms. Foley,
Aye.
Ms. George,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger also seems to have left the meeting. Mr. Hool,
Aye.
Ms. Kimball,
Aye.
Mr. Petrie,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye, Ms. Robbins.
Aye.
Declare the motion carried unanimously. I can tell it's getting late because I can't talk anymore. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you again in 3 weeks.